You're listening to Inclusive AF with Jackye Clayton and Katie Van Horn.
Hey, Jackye.
What up, yo?
I feel like we haven't recorded an episode with just the two of us in forever. So I'm very excited about today. It's a good day here at the Inclusive AF podcast. It's a Monday that we're recording. How are you, Jacqueline?
I am doing all right. I got this new Stanley water cup.
Oh, nice. And pink, very cute.
Like 35 pounds when you put water in it. I'm
So
healing.
you get a workout while you hydrate?
While you sweat. You literally sweat trying to carry this heavy water bottle.
Yes.
And then you cool off when you drink it. But I've been off for the last 2 weeks from work. As you know, I've been like hiding from everyone because I recently had surgery and I am home. It's my first day back. And apparently I said I was going to come back on the 27th and everybody's like, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh man, I should have gone back to bed.
No, we miss you. You can't stay away any longer. Well, I'm glad you're here. I want to ask you, what is the temperature in Waco, Texas right now?
At 3:22 p.m., the temperature in Waco is 104. There is an excessive heat warning. It's 104. What's the temperature in Phoenix right now?
At 2:20 or 1:22, beg your pardon, it's 110 degrees. With 50% likelihood that there might be rain, but it's also been 50% likelihood of rain for like, I don't know, the past month and a half. So, but yes, we are all, I think the entire like
100% chance that you're going to be hot. 100%.
Yeah, but I will say this, our humidity, I mean, our humidity is high for us right now, but it's not like bananas. Our humidity is 24%, which for us is like crazy high. What is your humidity in Waco, Texas?
I don't even know what the humidity is. I have no idea. I'll find out.
Yeah, just scroll down on your app on here. Do you want me to look up
humidity
Waco?
Is 23%.
How the hell are you lower in Waco than I am in Arizona? That makes no sense. Texas is like humid central.
The UV index is very high.
Now that we've done our time and temperature update. Remember when you could call that phone number and it would tell you the time?
Yes.
Back when we were babies on our rotary phone.
Way before Surrey.
Yeah, way before Surrey. Way before this entire computer in my pocket.
On a rotary phone.
Okay, so Jackye, I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to start with, and again, I know I've said this to you when it's come up. I want to talk about your medical experience, your recent medical experience. Yeah. And I want to start it off, and I want to ask this, and I think I'll put a link. I think I sent you one of these in Instagram or TikTok or something. The videos of the men being strapped into like an electrode thing where they feel the experience of cramps and having your period. Every time I see one of them, it just, it, on one hand, it causes you to chuckle, but then on the other hand, it's like, yeah. Every month.
Yes.
So tell us a story, Jackye.
Well, the thing I was thinking about, I really did take time off. So it was the first time that I got to like settle and reevaluate everything. Because as you remember, there was so much going on in my life when this hysterectomy thing came up. But what I forgot to say in the narrative is that I went to the doctor after I was talking about my pain level, and my friend was like you should go to the doctor. But I asked to reevaluate PMDD. So I've been saying I was diagnosed with PMDD 15 years ago, which is premenstrual like dysphoria, I think it's called. Okay. And it is beyond PMS. So it's premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And So it is extreme mood shifts, like extreme.
Yeah.
And I've had it for a while. And when I went to the doctor, when I told the doctor or the nurse practitioner at the time that I wanted to continue treatment because my PMDD is getting worse, she said to me, I don't think you have PMDD, even though I had this diagnosis for over 15. And she said, I think you're just in pain. And that's why your PMDD got worse. So there's something there, like we can start with that. So the first thing because I have been in pain for, my doctor's like, you've been in pain for at least 5 years, but I've been in pain for over 15 years and had this response to what was going on within my body during the time of my period for over 15 years. Nobody else had taken the time to really evaluate what we're talking about. And it was easy to blame it on this. I think they consider it like a mental illness or part of it that affects at the very least your mental health. And all of the doctors that were okay with that without bringing that up. So the answer was, let's look at your uterus, and for them to say you've been in pain for 5 years. And then I was like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, because this is the same pain that I've had. And then, like I'm in major pain, and I have been for a long time, and everybody's like, oh yeah, that happens. So I don't know what's the right level of pain. And then this was the first doctor that was like, this is bad. Like, this is really bad, and we can do something about that. You don't have to hurt anymore. And they were like, you're supposed to be uncomfortable, but you shouldn't be in pain. And I started thinking back about how many times I have been in a painful situation and didn't receive that care. So it made me look back and do more research and dig in. And they already know that Black people aren't treated for pain in the same way that their white counterparts are, in having any, whether it's a broken arm or an abscess in their mouth or whatever it is, are not given that level. And so it's like, even when you look at those people, when you look at the people who get hooked up to electrodes so they can figure out what a period feels like, we might not be on that same level. Like, this is a level 2, or this is a level 1, or this is a level 10, which could be a level 1 for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I still don't know what that means, because I've had to live my life in pain. And then I was like, so, we go through the process, and they didn't give me a lot of pain medicine. And I was like, so now I keep saying, is this pain? Is this pain? Like, I don't know. Am I in pain? Is this what pain feels like? Is this an acceptable level of pain? Because it is like, pain is a warning because of something that's going on. Just as like a certain smells, or your fight, flight, or freeze response, all of those things. It's like your body does these things. And I know that there are a lot of Black women in particular that have misguided signals of what's tolerable and what's not tolerable, simply to just survive through the day. And I don't think it was the first time. I'm 50 years old, the first time when it's like, well, women have more signals. They're talking about having more signals, environmental stressors that can cause fibroids. And I'm like, wait, what does that mean? And it's like, oh wait, racism can cause stress, can cause cancer. What? They just say that because people have said that forever, and I never knew that's what people are saying. And it's like, it's frustrating. And you have that scenario, right? And then
I need a 20-second you, please,
Yeah.
if I may. So when you say, just because I want the audience to understand, because I have a very mild PMS period issue, which I'm able to treat with just evening primrose. Can you share with the audience what the week before and week of are like were like for you?
Yeah. So like the week before, like literally driving is unsafe for me. Like, I literally want to hurt people. Like, children's laughter does not make me smile. Like the week before, I hate my husband. I don't want to deal with my children, and I have to focus everything on trying to keep pain at bay and focusing on what's really important. And those are the only things I can do. And then the week of the first 3 days, 2 to 3 days is with the heating pad, even if it was 110 degrees outside. Most of the time I would stay in bed during those times, at least part of the day, being in bed. And then also being in so much pain that my body gives out. So it'd be like going to bed like at 9 o'clock at night. And then, so that regimen has been over 10 years. Over 10 years.
And so I call that out because I want folks to understand, and this is, again, it goes back to the difference in medical support.
Right.
That if I was in that much pain for basically 2 weeks out of the month, every single month for 10 years.
Right.
That wouldn't happen, because I no doctor would allow that to happen if I went in and said, this is how much pain I'm in.
Well, but I also find it interesting, like the things that the reason we have so many outbursts, you've been seeing in the news, so many outbursts for white women, right? Because that's painful for them, which is hilarious, right? Like, you being in my neighborhood hurts me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to act out and say something. And it's like, nobody even did anything to you. Like, you're seeing people's tolerance level because of like people filming people. And I pick on white women specifically because that's what I see all the time, of like, oh, I'm a victim. And it turns into like an argument, and then it turns into tears, and it's all these things. And it's like a level of tolerance that you're just not willing to accept. So I have no idea how much pain, if people are used to living life without pain, then like a headache might hurt, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know what that's like. I've never done that. I've never had that.
Quick sidebar.
I don't know what that means.
Have you seen any of these videos of the gentleman who is fishing in his neighborhood, and he literally is recording every time someone comes over to ask him what he's doing in his neighborhood? And it is literally like he has like 7 or 8 videos from one day that, either some white woman or the police or whomever is stopping to say, like, do you really live here? Can I see your ID and get your address? But yeah, speaking of white woman tears. Right. So like pain, your tolerance or threshold of pain is it's not on the same scale as.
Well, it's not, it is. It's just that you haven't been forced to that level. Black women don't have a higher pain threshold. It's, I have to take care of my children, and I can't let this get in the way of me moving forward.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That's a better, yes. Because it's not, I can tolerate this more. It's, I am forced to tolerate it, and I can't just sit here.
There was something, and it was like, because they were like, behind every good woman is a, they've been trying to be cute lately, is a fluffy cat or something stupid or whatever. They're trying to be cute. Like, behind every great woman, is a man or a best friend. They've been trying to make those shirts and stuff. But then there's the one where it got to be real, where it's like behind every strong woman, it was a time where they didn't have a choice. Like, you didn't have a choice.
Right.
And I think that's a lot with all women. We were simply in this, we were looking at, there's a documentary, I don't know if you have Discovery Plus, I do, and I won't tell anybody why, but I do have Discovery Plus.
I do too.
And on Discovery Plus, they have the documentary about Viagra, right? And one of the things that they were talking about that was so important, they were talking about how it, impotency for men was like ruining marriages and having such a strong hold. And this is really a health issue. And then when me and Todd were watching it, I was like, it's a health issue because people weren't taught that, sex in a marriage is between, cisgender, male and a cisgender female, and they all revolves around somebody's penis. And there is no other lovemaking in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, that's why is there any medicine for women? No,
No.
because the research isn't there. Because it turns out with women, it's not just a body part, is what was said. They're like, oh, well, maybe one day, but this should cure it for every. No. And it's just like, where is the focus? Is following what the focus is. And what's frustrating is like, when I look at healthcare and then you flash forward to like, oh, do we need to have DEI training? And it makes me think part of the reason we have to is because we can look at the exact same thing and we're seeing it in two completely different ways. And I think like when we talk about like the movie Nope or the movie Get Out was very clear, like you as a white woman audience will see it different than me as a Black woman audience.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just chilling watching a movie, if you're not thoughtful about it. But that's what happens just in life. Just walking down the street of what you feel as a threat. And part of it is trying to reduce the noise of feeling, of having a reaction of things that perceiving things as a threat that aren't a threat.
So the pain that you were forced to tolerate,
Yeah.
like you mentioned fight or flight response, and it is like you were in constant trauma, head trauma because of that. And to your point, how does that distract from your everyday interactions with humans to be going through that?
I'm telling you, it was the funniest thing because, my executive producer, was just take a bowl out of my hand. I was like, oh my gosh, so annoying, whatever. And I just sat there and I was like, I'm not even mad about it. Like, that is something that would be like, it's something that's really small that would be a full trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, I need my life to go in a certain way. I can't get off task because I don't have the energy to deal with all of those other things that are getting into the way and living a life in pain. And they were like, and even my sister was like, I wonder what your life is going to be like with you not being in pain. Like, what's going to happen?
Who are you without that?
Right. Like, what if I like stop buying purses and stuff? Like, what if I was looking at that to make me feel better? And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh no,
I'm good. I have all the purses I need.
What if that's extreme.
Uh-huh. See, I just did it. I just fixed it for you. I just fixed it.
Yeah, all that I need. Well, now let's get,
and it's funny. I remember back when I was in my 20s, and it was prior to taking Evening Primrose for like my PMS. And ladies that have PMS and other issues, talk to your doctor about Evening Primrose because it is a godsend, I think. But for me, I remember, and the person that I'm talking about will probably remember this if I brought it up to him. I was on sales calls with one of my colleagues. We were in the car. I was driving. He was sitting in the passenger seat. And I remember like envisioning grabbing his head and slamming it into the window on the side of the car because I was so angry with, and it was like, hey, turn left up here, not right. And I was so mad. And it was like, oh my goodness, like this is not appropriate. Okay. Like what is going on? And it was very soon after that I like talked to my doctor and was like, so this happened. So what does this mean? And they recommended starting there and then, taking it to something further if I needed to. That seemed to cure most of it, but I think that's a piece. Go.
The reason I talk about that is that I am on like an antidepressant medication, and then that got increased. I don't know what that would happen to even have an impact right now of reducing it. I don't know. I'm at this point dependent on certain medications to regulate my well-being and probably never needed them. Like, for all I know, if you think about it, for all I know with this happening, my blood pressure can even out. I don't need all these antidepressants. I don't need anti-anxiety. All of it was traced from that. Like if that happened, I don't know. I think I would turn into a puddle on the floor. Like, I don't know what that would mean. That's just been part of my life for so long. I would probably start taking I would take pills out of habit. I would have to count them every day because I know what I'm on out of habit because I've been doing it for over 20 years.
And do you think it's a situation where, like, do you think that and this is just you personally, this is not a medical diagnosis.
Yes, certainly not.
Do you feel like for you that could have been a possibility that you were on some of these other medications because of the pain that you were in all the time, that because you were in so much pain, you were, focused on that, or that took so much of your brain power that dealing with some of these other things, you just literally couldn't and had to be on something to help alleviate some of that stuff?
Absolutely. I think because I know, like, when I needed to get a root canal, then I was triggered by my blood pressure, that something was going on in my body. My blood pressure started spiking up, and I was like, well, there's something else going on because that's happened before. And I also realized that I need to find, places where to be quiet and to think internally of trying to regulate what's going on, and try an evening primrose first. I don't think people recognize, if you go in and you have high blood pressure, the first thing your doctor wants to do is give you high blood pressure medicine.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me, and it might not be like that, but it's there's all these different medications. And so it's I'm treating the symptom without trying to look for the underlying cause. So I have no idea, but I know that I've been in pain for a very long time. This is the second time that I've had something that was surgically, can be fixed through surgery. And that was something that was extreme pain that had a reaction on my body. The thing that made me the most upset was because, and this is where, I am not doing this for the podcast. It's because I do DEIB all day long. It's just a part of my life. But it goes back to saying the same thing where I'm saying I'm in pain because I started my period. And then somebody else is like, oh, yeah, me too. I just started my period. We are not talking about the same thing.
Mm-mm.
Right? If you an example, I always would kid that my oldest Clay had colic. And then someone would say, oh, I think my kid has colic. And I would say, have you ever fantasized about driving to a rest stop and just leaving the baby carrier there? You would do a U-turn and come back, but you just thought, I'm just going to leave this baby in the buggy at the Safeway. And when they call 911, I will come right back. They were like, no. I was like, then your kid doesn't have colic. Trust me.
Right.
If you ever felt like leaving the child and just going out and going somewhere and coming back, because it's so extreme. But people say, oh, well, my baby's fussy. No, a fussy baby isn't colic. And so what I was having, I was taught to think as being menstrual cramps, but that's not what that was. But right. We are told that we're all having the same experiences. So either my doctor was a man who's never had this and has heard all of these various things, or someone who had a period who is basing my experience on them. Now, the reason I bring that back to DEIB work is that how many times did someone say, I'm having a problem with my boss? And then you automatically think, oh, well, maybe they're not getting along, without ever thinking about maybe you're being actually literally berated, discriminated against, sexually harassed, you are being threatened or blackmailed. The assumption is, oh, from an HR perspective, I already know what this is. And I can help you. Well, write it down. Let's not get too extreme, without really listening, because it's it's not safe, or they're already at some other level, or, well, it looks like you've had some problems and this person hasn't been able to work well with you. Now you're afraid of losing your job. So then how much pain will you take in order to take care of your family? How much pain will you take in order to keep your house? Right? And then the person that you reached out to that are supposed to be there to help at work, didn't.
Mhm. I think that, you know, so I'm going to answer that, and then I want to go back to the blood pressure medication. You know, I think this is one of those things that as HR folks, and not even just as, I think human nature is, when someone tells you a story, you want to relate to it. So you do think about, well, have I had a similar experience, or do I know what this person is going through? And to your point, the assumption is whatever you went through is similar to what I went through, but that's not the case in so
Right.
many of these issues. And, I think all of us as women of a certain age can tell, or can talk about stories of bosses that said inappropriate things, or that put you in uncomfortable situations, or whatever it might have been, colleagues, whatever. But at the same time, when someone comes to you and tells a story, your brain goes to, oh, I have dealt with this, and this is what I would want to have done. And so you think you're doing the right thing, but you're jumping 10 steps ahead versus saying, say more words. And, doing that, as when I was at Target, we called it a seek to understand conversation of just,
Mhm.
I'm just going to listen, and I'm just going to be
That's right.
to hear what you have to say. And I think that's such a piece of, I think you and I both are on this, a Facebook group, and there's a lot of different questions that come up, and pretty much every single one of them, I want to respond and say, did you just talk to the person and like have a conversation
Right.
before you're making all of these assumptions about what their intentions were, why they did such a thing, yada, yada, yada. And it just is always very odd to me that people don't just sit back and ask questions and say more words and let me understand more about this. Do you
I
think?
think you like, go ahead.
No, you go.
I wanted to offer something that I started doing in my training classes that I think it would be beneficial. And you can do it anywhere. What the exercise is you break into groups of 2, and you ask a group question, and person 1 is going to answer the question, and person 2 is going to listen, and all they can respond is say thank you. And you're going to do it for 5 minutes. And the person has to keep answering the question over and over and over again, but the other person can only say thank you for 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And what was interesting, it's always interesting to get the feedback from doing that exercise, where when the person doesn't feel the pressure to say something, or the pressure to try to sound like, people call it active listening, and they knew they were just going to say thank you, that they actually freed themselves up to listen. And the other person is like, when I knew that the person wasn't going to interrupt me or wasn't going to ask any questions, I felt like, one, I needed to clarify more about what was going on. But then when I heard myself, I realized I might not answer it the right way the first time. That's a really fast answer. I might need more time, or I didn't feel confident because I didn't get that feedback. Like, you go back and forth. And one of the things that we, I don't want to speak for you, but I think we've both said this piece, where part of the listening job that you have to do in these roles is accepting someone's truth and then building on that, instead of trying to prove someone wrong. Accept it as true, and that should be the baseline. When somebody says, I feel like I'm being harassed, in my mind, I'm like, okay, you're being harassed. Let's expand on that. And we're going to treat it like that, because that's the feeling that you're having. So we're going to open a case and we're going to deal with it just like that. I know there are people who hate that, and it's a pain, and it's going to cause me more work, but people need to understand how important the language is and what that means. If you tell me that I'm going to react in that way, and take your situation seriously. And I think that have an understanding of, it's so important to get to know the people that are on your team, but also just to know the world around you, to know that even if, people get empathy wrong, even if I think you and I both can talk about menstrual cramps, I still have to acknowledge that it's 120 degrees where you are.
Mhm.
So we aren't feeling the same things right now. Or it's 120 degrees and you have 2 freaking dogs that you have to walk. Or, like, we don't give people room to have these experiences, we make all of these assumptions and then make decisions based on these assumptions that are oftentimes wrong.
Absolutely. And I would say the other part of that exercise that I feel like comes up every single time I've done it is the person that is speaking at the end of it. It's God, that's the first time I felt listened to.
Right.
Ever. Like I've heard in the last 6 months, I've heard a lot of different, like this, this is the first time I've been heard or listened to. And then that also, like, it is sad because we are in such a reactive place of, let me fix it. Let me, let me jump to step 10 because I know where they're going to go. And you're like, but maybe you don't. Like, and yes, the assumption of truth, I think that is, it's a default we all need to have. But I also think there's so much bias in that assumption because we assume the truth from certain people.
That's right.
And other people, we go, oh, did that really? And I mean, we can say women, we can say people of color, we can say people in different socioeconomic situations. Every single piece to the puzzle, like, it's like right now, obviously the trans community is under a ton of stress. And when you ask about like the why, it's, oh, they're trying to shove this down our throats. They're trying to do this. And you talk to trans people, they're like, we're just trying to live our lives.
That's right.
And be safe. Like there is no, I'm going to try, like, that's not how it works, but there's no, I'm going to turn someone into something. And it just is so, like, again, that the assumption is there's something wrong or bad about what they're doing versus the assumption of truth, the assumption of good, the assumption of, whatever, we can create a list. So I think that's the other piece that people miss. Do you think, so the high blood pressure medication, so you and I have talked about this a little bit, and I'm going to ask this question.
Yeah.
Do you think that you were given the high blood pressure medication as just oh, hey, Black people are known to have high blood pressure, or there's historical context or a history of people that are people of color, not even people, Black people having issues with high blood pressure. So let's just put her on that and that'll shut her up or whatever you want to say.
I think it was part of it. I did have one doctor that was like, you don't have to have a high blood pressure once. And it was way when I was really young. But I think it's why people stopped at high blood pressure medicine instead of trying to figure out why I had high blood pressure.
Right.
And then just trying to adjust it. And even I have a new doctor more recently, and it was so funny because he was like, and I was excited about my blood pressure and it was only elevated a little bit. And he was so angry that he was like, why is your blood pressure this? And I was like, I don't know. He was like, why don't you know? I was like, I don't know why I don't know. Right. I was like, we're going to work on that. And not every doctor takes that place. I mean, one of the things that I did while I was healing, because I don't like to relax, was watch 24-hour A&E, which is like ER room in the UK. And like the people in the UK, because of the health system, I found it fascinating that two people would be at a club and somebody fell down and they went to the freaking ER together because they should see a doctor because they twisted their ankle. And I'd be like, that's dumb. Nobody would do that in the US. And then the doctor being like, okay, we're going to get a CT scan, a CAT scan, an MRI, an X-ray, and here's some pain medicine while you're waiting. And I'm like, what's happening? And it's because in the UK, in Europe, and with the social health care, they get incentivized for people feeling better and not coming back. They're trying to make people here. Whereas within the United States, that's not how people are incentivized. It's about medication and keeping people coming back. That's how they're making their money. And so it is knowing that it is probably easier to give give medication to cover it up than it would be to go through all of the various things that could be happening that's causing the high blood pressure. And I think that's what we do with our seniors as well. Knowing that my mother going through Parkinson's, couldn't communicate, all of a sudden gets, a wound. Or my mother was hospitalized for at least what was it, like 5 or 7 years maybe, and had COVID 3 times. Like, how is that possible? Right. And it's like people just like made it like it wasn't that big of a deal, and they're treated so, we don't treat people appropriately. People that are older still have that same stigma where we're not looking at why is this happening and what can we do to cure these things. And I'm not saying all doctors. I just think that it's another group where people stop giving true care and start giving just medication or trying to you don't know. It was interesting. I know, and I don't know if you had a similar situation, but like my grandfather, I remember him, he came home from the hospital. He was in the ER. We went to go visit him. He's 93 years old. He comes home and he says, well, they tell me they can't do anything. So I guess I'm just going to sit here waiting to die. He died 3 weeks later. They didn't want to do the surgery on him because he was going to die. So he said, I guess I'm just going to sit here and wait to die. And then he said, I hope they don't have the fish because that'll make me die quicker. That's what my grandfather said.
Yeah.
But it was like, well, if he died 3 weeks later, why wouldn't he just do the surgery and see if it would work?
Right. Right.
Because now we're spending the government's money and we're going to get in trouble for all of these different things because you are of a certain age, and it doesn't matter. I mean, we know that my mother died of complications of Parkinson's, but she really starved to death. And there's no reason for someone to starve to death, but that they're not going to have the quality of life we think. And so it's having that understanding, trying to go just one click further of trying to I think that we all have various situations, and I think life can be, we're so blessed that we're here and we can have this conversation, and that if we can you don't have to tick it up very much to be caring of other people and to try literally to see it from all angles, from somebody else's angle, which means being fully engaged in the other person to understand what they're going through, because what they're going through isn't the same as yours. Like, I remember a friend saying, I have to go to my husband's work. We're going on a road trip. And me and my friend immediately were like, we need to meet. Like, what is happening to your family? Like, I know there's people that couldn't have done a road trip or whatever, couldn't have taken the time off, but we knew that was tragic in that person's life. And there's so many people that just poo-poo people and then their situations, and they don't get treated. And I think I said this before, I just worry. And I always think that every time that I come out of these situations, I'm just like, I don't know what's going to happen the next time I go to the hospital or the next time I go to a doctor, or how to trust a doctor to be able to give me the care. I don't know how to do that.
Right. And I want to just expand a little bit on something that you said. We're in a country that it is all about that transactional medical service, and it is big pharma, and it is the insurance companies that are truly ruling the way that we receive care. And it's all about how many people can you get through the door, how quickly can you see them, how quickly can you write a prescription, all these things, versus taking the time. I just recently got a new nurse practitioner, and she sat with me for 30 minutes and it was like awkward almost, because I was like, I've never experienced this before, that someone sat and just talked about like, okay, well, let's talk about this part of what's going on with your care, and why are you doing this? And, how long have you been doing that? And not in an accusatory way, but just in a very curious, like, I want to know what's going on with you holistically, so we can have good discussions about longer term care or what might be needed. versus, normally you go in and it's, okay, you just need me to renew all of your prescriptions. Great. Awesome. Bye. And so like that's not to defend the medical community, because I think there are definitely some not great practices there. But I'd also say part of it is they're not educated to make those distinctions. And we know historically that a lot of the research, a lot of the different testing that has been done has been on white males or white people. And so I think that's part of it as well, is that there is such a lack of understanding of how different bodies, different groups react to, I mean, like I know we've talked about this book before, Criado Perez, I'm going to forget her name. But she talks about just some of the medical things that, the way that a woman reacts to certain medications versus a man, the way that a white person versus a person of color reacts to certain medications, that it just is, the research isn't there. And that's one of those things that like you just, it's Carolyn Criado Perez.
Mm-hmm.
And like The Invisible Woman Women is one of her first books. She's written a few others since then. But she, like the way she thinks about some of these things and the way that she is approaching this research, it's amazing, because it's stuff that people haven't questioned before or asked, well, is there a difference if it's a woman versus a man? And not just dosage, but
right.
Like when women are having heart attacks, they have very different symptoms than a man having a heart attack. And, our medical students being trained in such a way that they actually know what to look for, what to see, what to question, all of those things. So anyways.
No, I feel like it's so important. I mean, one of the things that they did, they put the oxygen thing on my finger, and my husband was like, are you going to be using that during the surgery? Because they don't work on Black people. So like, how are you going, what are you going to do about that? And they were like, what are you talking about? And we were like explaining, like, that isn't going to be an accurate read of my oxygen saturation.
Right. And I would
don't
like
know what I'm talking about.
Please.
Yeah, they have no idea what I'm talking about. They don't have any different ones. There's nothing they can do, and I'm about to be put out to go to surgery, and that's just what I have to deal with. And that can't be the only thing that's like that.
Well, and also, had Todd not said something, or if someone doesn't know that that's the case, then, what danger is there to that person that's being put under, that isn't being regulated the right way or given the right anesthesia or whatever it might be, like what happens then? But so as you think about kind of your journey, this is not the end of your journey with all of this stuff, but do you feel like you made the right decision on doing the surgery?
Yeah, I think I made the right decision. I probably should have done it a long time ago. And I just want to pay more attention. I have to have a reevaluation of what pain is. And I feel like there's probably a lot of Black women that have to have that, having that understanding of what pain is, and also what rest is. I mean, I was in the bed. We went out to dinner last night. It was the first time, besides one time when I went to Target, that I left the house. And I was like, I'm going to take this time to heal. And it's just, again, making sure that you're doing the right thing. I'm gonna pay more attention to that, and try to learn how to advocate for myself more. Because now at this point, now it's 50 and older. And listen, people all the time, I remember like my mom and my dad, they have like unknown bruises. They have no idea. And it could be something major. Like, it's the same thing. Like, oh, my mother-in-law just got her knee replaced. And then she's got rheumatoid arthritis. So she got an infection, and then they had to do it again. And then they had to do it again. So it's like, was that knee pain or not knee pain? Because
Right.
like this one lady was like, don't get your knee replaced unless your leg's about to fall off. Because there's so many things that could go wrong. But you're taught like that's just a normal
Yeah.
surgery, getting a hip replacement. All of those things are normal surgery. So that's the bias that people are going in with. And you say, oh, my knee hurts, and you're, over 50, then you should just get it replaced.
Right. It's been interesting because there's been a couple of medical things within my family recently that that has me questioning as well, like some of the tests, some of the things, and looking at not just the medical field, but also like you just said, that self-advocacy, that let me go find out all of the treatments, let me go do my own research. And by research, I don't mean go read on Facebook. I mean, like actually look at medical journals, look at people that do this work, not just randomly Joe Schmo on TikTok. Because I think that's the other part. Like I've been cracking up because I've seen quite a few folks on TikTok that are talking about certain weight loss medications and certain things like that. And they have scrubs on, but you're like, well, but are you a doctor or are you just
I
wearing
could just
scrubs?
buy some scrubs.
Right. And then I'm going to tell you all about the things that I know, because I know all the things, and you're like, huh, interesting. But again, this is part of the misinformation that we all have to dig through to get to reality. But anyways,
That's it.
what else would you like to say on this topic? Like what else would be helpful for folks?
No, I think that's the big piece. And I just feel like if you don't feel satisfied with the response, like your body isn't supposed to hurt.
Mhm.
If it does hurt, get to the bottom of why it's hurting and see if there's something there. It could be like there's nothing that can happen outside of surgery, or maybe you need to lose weight, or maybe you need to stretch more, all of those things, but find out, because it's a sign of something else that's going on. That's just the biggest piece. And so don't feel bad for making people do their actual job.
Right.
Helping to find that out. I think it's just a big piece.
I remember just as a student athlete, years and years ago, and like the recovery days, it was, you can be sore, but if you're in pain, something's wrong. Like, so there's a difference between being sore from a workout or from a whatever versus being in pain. And yeah, like asking the questions, digging in on it and finding out what is really going on, like how critical that actually is for folks. So Jackye, what's one thing you want to make sure our folks have heard from this episode?
Listen to people. Like, I think it's just like check your bias when you're going into situations, and especially like you can help somebody else who comes to you and telling you that you're in pain. I mean, the only reason I went, I was like, it's a fun party trick of people over the age of 40, which is what's your ailment? Like at parties.
Yep.
But just to make sure and support and get people to challenge that as well, and to get the help that they need. And I think sometimes it just takes another push from someone else. So that's what I think I want people to know, to advocate for yourself. But as you're listening to your people, don't assume you know what the pain is or that somebody else talks about. Try to help.
Right. I think for me, like it is the listen, but it's also, if someone tells you a story about their pain, or if someone tells you about what they might be going through, ask more questions too. It's like, you and I did at the very beginning of this talk about, our PMS and our periods and how, they were painful. And I remember telling you like, hey, just take evening primos and you'll be fine. No, like it's not the same. It wasn't the same even a little bit. And so like, I think that's part of it too, is that, the pain is not the same across the board for everyone. And then I'm going to echo the other part, like rest. So, for those of you who are not following like the NAP ministry and some of these others that are really focused on people of color, especially women of color, not being always the one that has to fix all of the things, like take the time you need to rest, to relax, to recharge. I think these fights, these conversations, this work has been laid at the feet of Black women for so long. And it's time that other people get involved in this fight and get involved in these conversations and get involved in this work. And so let Black women rest.
Yeah, do that.
Is that cool? Is that a good one?
I like it. Yep.
Okay. All right, folks. Thank you for listening to the Inclusive AF podcast. We have so many other topics that we need to go into, Jackye Clayton. So I
know,
think
right?
record again this week at some point. But thank you all so much for listening. This is Katie Van Horn.
And this is Jackye Clayton.
Bye.
Bye.